let me just quickly give an overview about how today's session is going to work. Yes, it's real estate in 2024. Now, we always do a real estate session, and usually it's earlier in the year. I don't know why. Last November when we started planning, real estate ended up in July. Little did we know all that would be going on with real estate. For some of you are going, what is she talking about? Others of you are going, oh, if I hear about the NAR litigation anymore, and if I hear all the confusing information about it, we're going to try to help people learn about that today. We will. And so we're going to be focused on that. First, we're going to take just a look at the real estate market and the stats. So we've got two kind of different focuses today, but that's what we're going to be about. So I invite you to look in your packet and pull out the sheets that have all kinds of stats and graphs, and some of you will love that stuff, and some of you will go, not me, but just bear with us. And I'm going to invite my co-presenter to come up with me on the platform up here. So Vince, if you want to come up. So yeah, I'll let you have a seat right there. Vince Burgess is a Texas realtor also. He happens to be transaction coordinator for my real estate business. Which becomes a very interesting role right now with all that's going on and forms constantly changing. So I'm so glad he's going to keep me organized and make our compliance director happy. Vince, go ahead and introduce yourself briefly and let them know a little bit about you and your background.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vince Burgess, and I'm a relatively newer Texan, maybe a decade ago, so don't hold that against me that I came from California. And in California, we had some investment properties, moved out here, became a realtor about 10 years ago. As Virginia was speaking, I kind of thought of an analogy. So Brielle, as some of you know, helps Virginia quite a bit. And have you ever been bowling and you have the bumpers that are up on each side? I think Brielle and I are the bumpers for Virginia. We kind of keep her, so she gets the strike at the end. So, but I'll do all of her transaction paperwork. Is that a good analogy, Virginia? And we enjoy working with her. I also am a real estate agent as well. So.
Some of you who I have the privilege of working with as real estate clients, especially when we get a house under contract, sometimes before we bring Vince in, but at that point, he gets copied on all emails. And so for those people, now you have a face to put with the name, and he's the one who will say, you did not mark a box in paragraph 21. You did not turn in this form. So he's the bad guy who reminds me, but makes me look better for the compliance office. So I appreciate it. That's a good idea, the bumper there. Both of them are tremendous to work with. So I appreciate that support. Okay, I asked you to pull out these three. You figure out which one. So what we have done, and it's interesting, we did real estate, wrote this down somewhere. If in your binder, in my binder, I went back through February of 22, real estate was our topic, and we had similar charts. And then in May of 23, and now in July of 24. So people who are really into analytics and statistics, if you have those past ones, it's kind of fun to see how things have changed over the time. We know that in 22, end of 21 and into 22, we had a crazy real estate market. And so those of you say, well, my friend sold their house in 22, and we say, that's nice, good for your friend. Let's look at what today's market is. So, but what I want you to do, we're going to be brave here. You have, and it depends on the order people put them in, this kind of blue page like this. The Georgetown Housing Report. Now, this is the latest stats we could get, because June's not out yet, would be the first quarter of this year. But you see a variety of things on there that you can look at. We see another one for Georgetown, just another representation. Both of them have similar information, median price, days on the market. We're going to let you look at these and pick out points of interest. And then we took a little bit broader snapshot to look at Williamson County. So what I want you to do is to take a minute, browse over those. Do you see anything that jumps out at you that looks of interest, that causes questions? And then I'm going to have you turn to a neighbor, twos or threes or wherever you can do this, and share, this looks interesting to me, and then we'll do some reporting out. So now's your time to look over these, and then we're going to, like I say, report out in just a minute. This was interesting. I went back to see in 21. We've got some people ready to share or ask questions or some combination. Reg, did you have an insight you wanted to highlight? Oh, let's see, mic runners. Can I get a mic runner? Here she comes. Okay. Thank you, Josie. Okay. All right. So Reg over on this side has a comment. Back there. Oh, thanks. Okay, turn your mic on. It's a good start. Is it on? Oh, it's on? Just hold it. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes,
Okay.
you can. Okay. I noticed there are several reports on median sales price.
Median sales price, okay?
It's all over the place, depending on what geographic scene you're looking at.
All right.
I noticed Williamson County is down to 435,000. Georgetown is up to 425,000.
Right.
And then there's another median price, 415,000 on this white sheet.
So, and that's a good point to make. So, first of all, what this reminds us is the statistics are general. Again, we've tried to narrow it down. But if you are looking to buy, and more people in this room, if you're going to be engaged in the real estate market, it is to sell. And so you want to know that's the reason you will be wanting to look more specifically at your immediate area or neighborhood. So these are general stats. I just wanted to clarify that. And you raised a good point too. The reason there's a difference on these two Georgetown reports, this one, like this, the Georgetown report that has 424, that was for the first quarter of 2024.
Okay.
This other one, like this, is for the May report. So that's the reason. So 415 to 425 in there, but that's the reason it's a different time period there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Another thing, of course, just looking at this Georgetown housing report, that's basically the only number that's up. Active listings are down, closed sales are down slightly. Although months on inventory has apparently gone down in the last year, at least.
So he's commenting on these, and he's so right. And Vince will jump in too, even like on our Office Keller Williams calls. We've talked about, what we're seeing going on. We often talk about The market's been a little slower perhaps, but there is still activity going on. And so active listings are down, and then close, so it's a balancing act in there. I know in my own work I'm involved with a group, Buffini, it's a real estate coaching program and works a lot with the National Association of Realtors. And it's been interesting that usually across the board, we see the majority of the activity in the first quarter or so, or first third of the year. And their rough numbers have been kind of 40% there, and then about 20% over the summer, and then at the end of the year, about 25% of the real estate business happens. But what we've seen this year is kind of a reverse. The year started slower, so it's been about 25%. They're predicting more of an increase in activity at the end of the year. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think also, so these are just general stats. If you
Right.
ran the numbers for Sun City, specifically, they would look a little different. Also, I'm sure our lenders in the room, would attest that overall there's been sort of a hesitation in terms of interest rates overall. So this captures not just Sun City, but your first-time home buyers and everyone. And so those of you who've been around a while, if you looked at a 40-year span of interest rates, 5, 6, 7% isn't that bad, right? Some of you could probably remember buying your home in the 80s for 12, 14% interest or higher even. And so what we've seen this last year or so is a ton of millennials coming in the market where all they've known is 4%, 3.5%, under 5%. So there's lots of hesitation, but homes that are priced right are selling, and homes are coming on the market. Overall this year, we expected a 5 to 7% increase in pricing, and that's what we're seeing overall.
An interesting part about that is, yes, we went through the times like 22, where it was ridiculously high artificial inflation. And then we see the years where we dip down. When I started in real estate 20 years ago, 20 plus, I had an older gentleman who was my first mentor and was big on market analysis and what does the market tell us and what's going to happen over the long run. And Raymond, in his deep voice, would say, there are going to be the years where houses go up 14% value. There are going to be the years where they go down. But over the long run, I don't know if you'll agree with this, Vince, he says, it's about a 3% increase per year, about. But it is kind of interesting. And that's what we were saying in 22 when it was so high. And then when we started coming down, the market's dropping. Now the market is correcting if you went back to, normalized to look at it. So that was kind of interesting to see. But Reg also mentioned 2 other points on this page. How many months of inventory? Of course, as Vince mentioned, it's going to vary in your neighborhood, your area. And it does have a tremendous amount to do with how your home is priced and how your home shows. So that's just something. But so if, look at 2 months about inventory. Days on market, if people are planning, and again, we can drill down more specific to a neighborhood or area. But this is something to be aware of. So right now, for the first quarter this year, houses tended to be on the market, the average was 88 days on the market. That's when we would get a contract. And then roughly another 33 days to close. So 121 days was the average, so just to consider that. And so here, go back to, this is what contributed to that artificial inflation 22. 21, because there was such a limited number of houses on the market, it was 16 days to go under contract, 42 days to close because it got under contract so quickly, total of 58 days. You know, that's where we put the house on the market on a Thursday, get under contract. Multiple offers under contract by Tuesday. Those were the days. But some of us are still seeing that if we price it right and it looks right. So thanks for those questions, Reg. Other questions or insights people have? Yes.
What effect do you think the election is going to have on the market?
Good question.
Our crystal balls are broken. That's what I tell people.
They're in for repair, aren't they? You know what I think we see, and we haven't talked about this, is over the years I've often heard, and it seems like before an election, without getting into the politics and all of that, but there's this uncertainty, and things are kind of in flux, not to mention all the other factors. Once the election is over, it's kind of, okay, life goes back and we resume. Now, I mean, it's some bizarre thing, and I'm not going to get into politics and all of that, but it's a very good question. Overall, I think some people just kind of want to wait to get through an election and then go on. I don't know what your take is.
There is some indication that, you know, inflation has sort of gone down, which is one of the linchpins for the Fed decreasing interest rates. And so there's some indication which don't directly impact mortgage rates, but indirectly do. So there's some indication we might see some relief, which again, and it may not be applicable to those of you in the room, but a lot of first-time home buyers or people looking to upsize, interest rate is still a big deal for their mortgage, and that's really holding some people back. So we're thinking that with a lower interest rate, we could see a lot more movement in the market coming up in the fall. But I will say this, and you can give me your experience. Ever since COVID, it feels like things have been somewhat unpredictable, right? Because COVID hit, there was this pause for 2 or 3 months where nothing happened, and all of a sudden people started printing money in their basement. I don't know where they got it from. And then cash buyers came out of the closet, and you know, prices doubled in some cases. So it's been a little tentative since then. But we are seeing a market correction over the past few years. You know, people have saying, "Oh, the market's crashing." No, it's not. It's just correcting itself, I think.
And if you look long run, it's interesting to see how it has kind of leveled out there. Okay, other question? Here's another one. Okay.
Well, I do have another question.
Oh. Oh.
It was my understanding traditionally that the interest rate type mortgages was tied to the bond market, not to the Fed, to the prime.
Okay.
In this last cycle, when interest rates went up so much, it was at the same time that they kept raising the prime rate. And I don't understand how mortgage rates.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a quick question. Oh. Okay, so the question is, if I think, and Vince, you can address this one. Interest rate and what it's tied to, bonds and so on, and you want to give a brief explanation, and this is one you could do a whole program on. We're not going to do that right now, but if you want more questions too, or more information afterwards, visit with Vince, visit with Lori or Blake. They can certainly provide insights and resources. You want to give a summary?
Probably if there's a lender in the room, I would defer to the lender to be more specific about that. But you're correct. Their mortgage rates are not directly tied to the Fed rate. It is the bond rate. But I'll let a lender
So
talk about
visit
that one.
over at Thrive Mortgage to get more specifics about that relationship. Okay, other questions? Okay, right back here, Mary has a question.
On the orange and green sheet, the Williamson County stats, down on the right, it says average close to list price. That's for the county. How's it doing in Georgetown? For instance, there's so much building going on, new construction. So I kind of wondered about how they split up. Are new homes sold faster, and closing dates, percentages?
So, and this is what she's commenting on, the average close to list price. And the interesting part about that stat it's so influenced. Some people price houses more at market. If you price the house ridiculously high or low, and this does not count all new sales. I believe in our MLS, it's only what goes through the multiple listing. So overall, we often see it's around 97%. You want to add to that, Vince?
It is. It's pretty close to this. So what we also see in terms of new home builds, they're not always in the MLS. They don't put everything in there, and you know, builders are throwing everything in the kitchen sink at home buyers right now. So I have a few under contract where the builder gave my clients $50,000 to buy down the interest rate, pay for their closing costs. They gave them so much money they couldn't give them any more money. They had to pull money back. You know, there are limits on how much money you can get, and so I think that fiddles with the price, right? So I think it's a little more difficult. That's a difficult question, but not everything is in the MLS in terms of new builds. So that can skew the data a little bit.
Well, is it true, the same figures for Georgetown then under MLS, the average close to list for Georgetown, not just Williamson County?
What are you on the?
Okay, the orange and green, again,
Oh,
on
yeah.
the lower right, this is only Williamson County on the orange and green sheet.
Right.
And so is there anything I'm missing for Georgetown on that
I
figure?
don't think we picked that up on this. These are
Okay.
ready-made forms that we could download.
If you look on this other page here,
This one.
at the bottom right, now this is May 2024, and it's a 96%
Okay, all right.
close to
Thanks
list.
for finding it.
Thank you.
And again, so this is based on May of this year. So we tend to be around that. But again, if houses are priced extremely high, and that's when we see price adjustments sometimes. So it's kind of hard to get a handle on that stat, I think. But nevertheless, it's there. Okay, maybe one more? Or are we? And if you want to visit more about particular things, Vince, maybe we could have you at one of these tables or at my table if people want to visit more with him about that or with me about it. So anyway, but good resources, and the important part again is having information. And the other part is asking your realtor for information. You know, it's being the informed consumer. So if you are looking to sell a home, what's going on in my area? That's the reason as realtors, hopefully we're providing a comparative market analysis, looking at comparable homes. What are they selling for and what are the recent sales? Ideally in the last 90 days. If there's not a lot of activity in the area, we go back maybe 180 days. We don't really like to. But we have to look at that. It doesn't matter what happened 2 years ago, or it doesn't matter what happened so your realtor needs to be sharing that information. Often we come up with a range. They've been selling in this range. Now, how does your home fall within that range? What kind of upgrades do you have to compare? So you wanted to add something?
One thing that I'd like to add is historically, real estate agents have been taught to do market analysis based on sold comps, and I think that's sort of a mistake. And my strategy is to also tell you what is on the market right now, what is pending, and what's on the market. Right? Does it really matter if your neighbor sold 3 months ago? But if you go to put your home on the market, what's your competition pricing their home at? That's equally important to me. But historically, we really haven't done that. So I think that's a big piece. If you ever find yourself in that situation, ask your realtor, are you considering in these comps the current competition? Because that can also sway what you list your home for.
So, yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason most, I don't know, here are the comps. Here are the ones that are pending. Here are the ones that sold. So you get that total picture. Also looking at how many days have been on the market. Oh, I like the price on that one. but it's been on the market for 100 days. Well, that tells you something. It's not selling. Now, is it the price? Is it the condition of the home? Is it the term? So there are lots of different factors. But that's when we talked about what's the value of your realtor, which will lead us into the next part of this. But, Reg, did I see another question?
Just briefly mention Sun City. This is sort of an odd situation we have here in Georgetown. And being a resident of Sun City, I'm interested in how valid is this information for Sun City, or is it so unique it doesn't count?
Well, that's a subpart, but not to put you on the spot or anything, but we're working together, the stats about Sun City, and so that's a very fair question. You know, in the room here, we have people from Round Rock, Terra Vista, we have people in Serenata, we have all neighborhoods represented. But you're right, we need to zero in, and I will make sure you have the updated information. Not to put me on the spot, Reg, but you do have a comparative market analysis that we're going to update.
To a certain extent, Sun City is a national market, not a local or regional market. I know I moved here from Washington, D.C.
Well, that's a good point. We have people moving from all over, but yet it's what's happening locally. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. You know, anytime you look at a unique neighborhood community like Sun City, you're going to want to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, right? So I'm not going to look at homes outside of Sun City when I'm pricing your home. It's going to be like market. I wouldn't, with rare exception, I wouldn't go outside of that, you know. But overall, I think these general numbers aren't too far off. We do have access to specific Sun City data that we can pull and we could get you. But that's a great question. But anytime you're working with a realtor, you want to make sure that they are pulling the right comps, right? If I'm living in Georgetown Village, I'm not going to pull something in Sun City as a comp or vice versa. Yeah.
Good question. Okay. Well, I think that's a great segue for our next part of the discussion, which has to do with how many of you have heard some reference to, and it's often said, NAR litigation, NAR settlement. Have any of you heard anything in the media about that? Okay. All right. Well, good. Some of us have not. Good for you. First of all, NAR is the National Association of Realtors. It is the national organization that, as professionals, we belong to. And obviously, they are looking out for realtors and support. We're not going to get into all the ins and outs of the litigation and the settlement. If you want to know more specifics, talk to Vince afterwards. I'll put you on the spot. What we are going to talk about is how does that impact you as consumers? What does it mean for you and us where the rubber meets the road, okay? And we're going to give just a brief context, and then we're going to do a couple of role plays to help you develop more awareness, both as a buyer or as a seller, and what it means in practice for you. So we're going to do that, and then we'll kind of debrief, drill down to some of the questions. The most important thing, okay, so what caused all of it? It was about really commissions and was hard to, and get into all the millions of dollars. Besides, lawyers have really done well. Still doing well when they keep coming up with new forms for us. Yes, they have, anyway. But the greatest thing is, and there are good things that come out of it, is the need for transparency, for people to understand in specific what we've referred to as commission that now we're generally calling compensation. In fact, I think it's great that we've made that switch. I know when I do an estimate of net for people, both as especially as a seller, I've always called it realtor compensation, you know, and there is no set fee, and it remains that. It's always negotiable. We, as realtors, we may make a recommendation. We'll be talking about that. But you know, a lot of times people, oh, well, all realtors do is do the paperwork to put a house on the market. Do the paperwork, put a sign in the yard, put a lockbox on the house, and that's all realtors do. That's not quite true. A lot of work that
Not a
goes
good
in.
realtor, anyway.
What's that?
Not a good realtor. They would do more than
Good
that.
point. So, you know, what is the value we bring? And sometimes we have not made that clear. People just take for granted the work that's going on their behalf. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But, so I think, are we ready to move into our role plays here?
Did you want to give high level of the couple of
Go ahead,
things
yeah.
that came out of the NAR
Yeah.
lawsuit? You know, as
Are
I've
you hearing okay?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? So the National Association of Realtors settled a lawsuit, and there's been lots of misinformation. I actually watched the news when it first came out, and I was sort of shaking my head like, this isn't accurate. This is not, you know. But if you get your you know, all of your truth from the news, then that may be a problem. So, you know, the news is not always accurate. But two things that came out of the NAR lawsuit. One is that effective August the 13th, cooperative compensation, so that is what a seller or a broker, who your agent would pay in cooperation to bring a buyer to you, that can no longer be published in the local multiple listing service. So right now, if a couple comes to me and says, hey, we want to look for homes in Sun City, and I set them up with the listing portal, and they tell me which ones they want to see, I can see on my printout what my upfront, transparent, what my compensation will be. Effective August the 13th, that is no longer the case. That those fields will be taken out of the MLS. The only way I would be able to find out is if I call the agent. If Virginia's the listing agent, I say, hi, Virginia, I've got, you know, someone interested in 123, you know, USA Street. Are you offering cooperative compensation? And then she would say, yes, here's the percentage, or no. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and it's pretty wild to think about, the second thing is you have to have a signed buyer representation agreement before you can show a property to a buyer. Now, our broker has always required us to have a buyer representation agreement. But some states and some brokerages, I'm not sure, it's the Wild West, I guess, they don't do that. But in this state and our brokerage in particular, we're required to have that up front. So effective August 13th, that's no longer an option. You have to sign a buyer representation agreement before I can show you a home. So those are the two big things that have come out of it. So I don't know if you've heard more than that, or if there's been, again, I reiterate, as Virginia said, realtor compensation has never been set. That is always negotiable, and you can determine in conjunction with your realtor how much you're willing to pay your realtor, and then cooperatively pay the buying agent.
So to kind of demonstrate that, we're going to do a role play now that gets at that. And I know you've got a lot of questions rolling around. Remember, you've got your paper there. Write down your questions, and we will address questions at the end. But for this first part, we're going to do it as a buyer. I'm going to be the buyer. Vince, I have asked to be my realtor. We're not going through the introductions and all that. We've already agreed we're working together. We're down to doing the paperwork. So we're going to, this would be like we were doing that. And as he said, it's this is what then gets into the what's communicated, and that we'll come back to that later about the, I think it's crazy we can't put it in MLS, we can communicate it in other ways, but we'll worry about that in a minute. But, so right now Vince is the realtor, and I'll let you take over, my realtor.
Okay, everybody get out your popcorn. It's going to be fun. So, Virginia, again, I just thank you for meeting with me today. We had a previous conversation around, what you're looking for, and we've kind of narrowed that down to Sun City. And I set you up with a listing portal. Were you able to access that?
I did.
Okay,
I saw
good.
some neat places.
Good, good. So one of the things that has come up in our industry recently is, and while we've always done this, I just want to, kind of dispel any myths that you might have heard. Have you heard about the NAR lawsuit?
I have, but it's thoroughly confusing.
Yeah.
What does it mean to me?
Absolutely.
Simplify it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of misinformation out there, but I wanted to clear a couple of things up
Oh,
for
I heard
you.
that we don't have to pay our realtor anymore. That was my favorite thing I
Oh,
heard.
okay. Well, I'm glad we're having this conversation now to clear that up.
I thought you were working for free.
Right. So a couple of things that have come out of that lawsuit is, one, effective August, when I go in my system that I use, the cooperative compensation is no longer published. So I've got to then call the agent and ask them what they're willing to compensate me for. The second thing is, before I can show you any homes, I have to have a signed buyer representation agreement. Now, earlier when we met, we reviewed kind of my value proposition and all the things that I'm going to
Yeah, you
do
do
for
a
you.
lot.
And I appreciate that because, for many years, it was a mantra for real estate agents to sort of like make it look easy. And like we're kind of the duck that on the top of the water, we're kind of, and then underneath we're kind of swimming. And those days have sort of gone. I want you to know that I'm working for you. That at the end of the day, I want you to get the information you need so you can buy with confidence. Does that make sense?
It does. There probably is a lot more that goes on than what we think about. I'm not sure about this thing about the compensation to the cooperating broker.
Yeah.
What, you're going to
You
explain
bet.
more about
Absolutely. I'm so glad you want more information on that. So basically, how it has worked in Texas and in most of the United States is that the seller offers the buyer agent incentive, basically compensation to bring a buyer to the table. And if I'm from a seller's perspective, don't you want 50 or 100 different agents trying to show your home? And
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but at this point, coming up in August, the way that we get paid will be different, and we're going to have to kind of specify that. So, my usual and customary fee that I charge is 3% of the purchase price of the home. Now, I do realize that many of the homes that you've looked at are in Sun City. Now, Sun City is a bit of a unique market, and in my experience, sometimes they're not offering the full 3%. They're offering maybe 2.5%. So what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to negotiate my rate down to 2.5% if you find a home that is not offering my full 3%. How does that sound?
Well, I appreciate you doing that. It's kind of crazy, but so now I heard some people say that if we had that situation to come up, and if you had told me 3, and they're only offering 2.5, that I have to pay that other 0.5% directly to you?
Absolutely, yes. That would be our agreement that we're deciding on now, and we've decided that you want to work with me and you like the value that I bring. We've talked about, do you know what option money is and what earnest money is and what does the contingency look like? And when can you back out of the contract? And Vince, I'm making a $500,000 investment. Don't I need? And that's when I come as your proactive, trusted advisor to help walk through with you every step of the way. So, and there's a value that we have to place on that. There's a, like we all have jobs to put food on our table, and that's a number that we have come up with. But yes, and then what I've had some clients do is say, Vince, I don't want you to show me anything under 3%, right? If your compensation is 3%, then you can tell me, Virginia, you can say, you know what? I don't want to have any out-of-pocket expense in this way. So you can tell me, you know what? Don't show me anything under that gives you less than 3%.
It sounds like a good idea, but like you mentioned, we're kind of in this situation.
Yeah.
Since I want to buy a home in Sun City, and I do know, I've heard, for whatever reason, not everybody pay, and there is no set fee. I
There's no
understand
set
that,
fee.
but I also know what's a common practice.
Right.
And so, but I appreciate your honoring that. I think they should pay 3%, but anyway, that's another discussion.
And again, in light of that, and I'm willing to negotiate that down to 2.5% for you.
Okay, all right.
And she hires me, and everyone lives happily ever after.
And we go buy a house on San Saba, and everybody's happy.
Right.
So, okay, so we're not going to take a lot of time to discuss that right now because I want to flip sides because I think that will, continue to explain that. But so now, but be nice. Vince is going to be the seller, and he's already agreed. I'm going to be his listing agent. And we are now down to where, looking at the paperwork. And so that's what we're going to be doing. And we're just going to focus on the part about the compensation. Okay? So are we ready to go ahead with that? Okay. So Vince, I look forward to working with you on the sale of your home. We've spent a lot of time looking at the market, both in terms of comparable homes that have sold recently and your competition right now. How do you stack up? And so we're now down to that point where we've come up with a list price of what we think will be the appropriate price, and that's looking at the overall package. And now part of this, and this, some of you, in fact, we looked at a form earlier, and it was different. They made some changes.
It was different.
Yeah, we're getting ready for this change mid-August, so we're moving into it. But one of the things that's discussed in here is this broker compensation. And it's really not any different than what we talked about before. It's just more transparent, more pronounced.
I like that.
So it's very clear. As I've mentioned before, as your listing agent, for the service I bring, the expertise I bring, we take that into consideration. And as we've looked before, we look at the total package. So, as a listing agent, 3% is as a professional selling your home. But then we also have to talk about what are we going to pay the other side, the cooperating broker.
Why should we pay the other side?
Good question. Because some people say, oh, won't the buyer pay their own agent?
Yeah.
That makes sense. So it still comes out of one pot. But anyway, so, we want to have the greatest number of people coming to see your home.
Okay.
And so if I say I'm not paying anything for the cooperating broker, just come, show your home, and let your buyer's agent pay. That's not going to go over real well. We want to incentivize agents to show your home. And my recommendation, is always negotiable, is that it be 3%. Reiterating, there is no set fee, but common practice. So that's where my recommendation is. We would offer 3% compensation or consideration to a cooperating broker, and then 3% to the listing side.
Well, my neighbor down the street, their house is for sale. How much are they offering their buyer's agent?
Well, it's interesting you mention that because up until now, pretending we're in August, I could look and tell you what they're offering. Now I don't see it in the MLS.
Okay.
I can call them and ask them if I have a buyer So to me, it's adding steps. And you know what's really crazy? It's more paperwork too. Yeah, I just put two of my listings, one under contract this week. We did the agreement. I thought, oh, good, we've got the paperwork done. Vince will be happy. And then here comes the other paperwork. Now we have those supplements about the agreement between brokers, what we're going to pay. And buyers and sellers have to sign on it. They're just complicating things. But, you know, it's a matter of, I want to bring in the greatest number of people to look at your home.
So my neighbor also said that their agent was charging them 5%, and they were doing 2.5% each side.
And it is negotiable for the expertise, the experience. You have to compare apples to apples or whatever.
Okay.
What all services are being provided. And again, it is negotiable, but I do 3% to the buyer's side and 3% to the listing side. Are you hearing okay? Okay.
So one last question. Can I just, if I want to list my house for $500,000 and so 3% or 15%, can I just list it for $515 just to kind of cover the other agent and get more money out of my house?
You could. That's where we have to go back and look at the comps. What you know, and this is going to be such a dilemma as we move into this. But before, when we've looked at the price of a house, let's just assume that's all part of it. Yeah, we could, but if you look what's selling, that's higher than what houses are selling for.
Okay.
So we've got to balance that out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
So we ready to move ahead?
Yeah, let's move ahead.
Sign on the dotted line. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, yes, Helen, it's okay. Calm down. So now I know we've got some people eager with questions here, but what we wanted to do was for you to get a feel more than our just talking about it. I thought by our demonstrating this, it brings about maybe a different level of questioning or understanding or confusion, whatever. Helen has a question right here.
My question is, do I understand then that you will, as a seller, be paying each of the cooperative realtors 3%? So that adds up if you have more than one.
Oh, no, it's going to be to the person who buys your home.
Only the one
okay.
who brings you the
No,
buyer.
All
like
right.
you asked, no, we don't pay people to show your home. But when we have a closed sale, good question, we have to clarify terms here, that is the cooperating broker. And in our scenario, it would be 3% would go to that side and 3% to the listing side. But I'm glad we clarified that. Carlos?
I'm still totally confused after your description. I'm accustomed, when I bought my home 10 years ago, of paying 6%, to the agent, period, end of story. Now, how does it all start? If I wanted to buy a home, how much will I have to pay 3% to the broker? Or is it still the seller who pays for my broker?
And I think that's it comes out of one pot. I mean, when you bought your home there on Trail Flowers,
Stetson, yeah.
So as you said, you paid 6%.
Yeah, end of story.
And right there, okay?
Yeah.
And so you didn't know, of that, some of that 3% went to the realtor. If it was 6%, 3% went to your buyer's agent, and 3% went to the listing agent. This was just happening. It's just now, it's that transparency. It's really how it's set up. Go ahead, you were wanting to add.
So we're not thinking much is changing at all. It's just spelled out differently in the paperwork. And so there's two boxes, and one says, you agree to pay me 6%, and right below that, of the 6%, as your agent, I'm going to pay the the buyer's agent 3%, and it's spelled out. Before it wasn't as clear as it was. It was
Yeah,
further down
it
and kind of buried.
separated.
So is it still the seller who pays those 6%?
It is all negotiable, and it's always been negotiable.
It comes out of the total price of the home.
Correct.
So it's kind of how you look at it, but it is that total pot. When you get a settlement statement, it's divided out that way. Now, it does on our listing agreement, you can say there will not be compensation to the broker, to the cooperating broker. I wouldn't advise that. I don't think
Yeah.
they're going to show your home.
Yeah, there's a second box on here that says compensation without co-broker compensation.
But in reality, what's going to happen is it not more the buyer is going to pay 3% and the seller 3%? Is that what's going to happen?
Correct.
in
If,
reality?
And
if
that's
a
the way
buyer,
it's been.
yeah, well, in that case, if you signed a listing agreement with Virginia and you said, I don't want to pay the co-broker compensation, and I just want just to pay you 3%, then that second box you would fill out. And then anytime an agent wanted to show your home, they would call your agent and say, hey, I've got a buyer interested. They love your home. Are you cooperating? Are you offering cooperative compensation? And Virginia would say, no. And then she'd go back, I would go back to my buyer and be like, hey, you love this home, but they're not offering any compensation, so you have to pay my entire fee of 3%.
Which
What do
would
you
be
think
in
the buyer,
addition to the price of the home.
right, what do you think the buyer would do?
The one it rolled in.
Let's look at something different. That's not always the case, but that is the case. 87% of all homes listed offer cooperative compensation currently. So
Did that?
Yeah, by cooperative compensation, you mean the seller buys?
pay
pays his-
pay the buyer agent.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
That's the
sir.
information I was looking
sir.
for.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, right here.
So that means to me
Is it my
that the person who is the listing agent needs to be flexible if you're considering negotiable rates, which everybody is now.
You're right. I mean, it's negotiable, but that's where we always have to come back to what are we providing and.
It is. I think absolutely. I completely agree with you that you have to have a spirit of flexibility. And I thought about this from a different perspectives. Most of the time, you don't go to your dentist and say, "I want to negotiate that root canal price," or "I want to negotiate," And we've gotten to a habit of saying, I hear what you're saying, your fee's 3% or 2.5%, whatever it is, or 5 or 6 if you're paying both sides, but I don't want to pay that. Well, you have options, right? You can say, thank you, but no thank you. I don't want to use you as a realtor. Or the agent can say, sure, I'll reduce my commission. Or you say,
reduce
no,
my
we agree.
services.
Or reduce your services, yeah. Or you say, we agree, we don't work together. But you absolutely are empowered as a consumer to negotiate on your behalf, and then at the end of the day, say, I'm okay with your fee, or I'm not okay with your fee. Yeah, absolutely. But you're right, in this new environment, there needs to be more flexibility, and I always say, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So, that could be, it depends on your level of service that you get, I think.
And on the kind of the inside, what we're hearing now as realtors is demonstrate your value. How do we, sometimes we're doing a lot of work that we just don't let our clients know about. So we have to articulate what it is we bring to the table so that, and if someone's not providing all those services, if someone is just putting a sign in your yard and that's kind of it, well,
Absolutely, and I think it's so fair when you meet with a realtor to interview them, to list your home. Ask them, why should I use you? What do you, what's the value in using you? Make them work for it, because now we are coming into an environment where good agents, agents in general that want to be good and excel have to stand out. You have to show your value. Absolutely. I think that's a great question.
Reg has a question. Here's Mike.
Yeah, maybe I can help a little bit here. this is probably the one transaction you're involved with where you are paying somebody else's beneficiary. If you follow what I'm, if you have a legal case, your opponent does not pay for your lawyer. Okay? That's the closest thing I can come with. You're paying for a benefit for the person on the other side of the table. And I think that's been a tradition. It's been set up that way. I'm going to be crass about this because the kettle of money is going to this side of the table, and they're going to dip into that to pay back. Now
Because they're
okay,
bringing that buyer.
I'm not discounting the worth of each of them.
Uh-huh.
And so I guess what I would say, what if you had a closing statement that would say, you know, when you list who pays what and who pays what, on that closing statement, it would say on the buyer's side, buyer's commission.
Yeah, so
Is
on,
there-
on the seller.
Do you think this is going to evolve to something like that? I'm wondering if it won't. I mean, right now, the way it's set up is it's illuminating something that some people would say is blackmail. Okay? Well, I'm sorry, I'm
Oh, no,
using
you're good.
harsh
You're
terms.
making the point.
Yeah, good point. Another
And when you talk about, well, you've got to pay the buyer's 3%, or the inference here is if you only pay 2%, well, then he's not going to, or he or she is not going to give you full service or put you at the top of their list and things like that. I mean, that's the pressure right now on a buyer's, you know, you're not going to do that if you're selling a house right now. But is this going to evolve, do you think? I mean, I'm going way beyond, but I'm getting in for the reason why the settlement probably came about. And I think that's hard for people to understand because before you just paid 6% and that was a free or 3 for whatever it was in the.
And I think you make a good point right there.
Transparency.
There was a lack of transparency
Yeah.
in the process before for a lot of agents. I can say that every listing, you know, that I had, I sat down with my sellers and I explained exactly what the numbers were.
Yeah. And
another way to consider it is you are paying your agent 5%, 6%. That's what you're paying your seller's agent. Yeah. And your seller's agent is agreeing to take that 6% and give half of their 6% cooperatively to this other agent. That's
So-
another
perspective on it.
perspective. Yeah.
And that's a good point. When we look at this, the listings are technically taken in the name of our broker. So it's the broker who is being paid.
Yeah.
And that's how our previous paperwork worked. The broker will be paid whatever percent. Then further down, several paragraphs later, it would say, so we will pay the cooperating broker. But so when people say, well, I want to negotiate that fee is set up in the listing agreement. And it's the broker. And brokers may put restrictions as we have, and I guess I don't know if it's going to stay the same. What in our brokerage, I guess it's that we would pay 3% to the buyer's side. She's probably going to keep it the same.
Yes. So currently, our broker is requiring 3% to the buyer side, but this will change because this has to change. I would assume.
It's negotiable, but it's back to again
Right.
the service.
But I think the best thing, to me, solid agents have welcomed this lawsuit and the findings because it just requires us to be on our game, have the difficult conversations, but don't have to be difficult, right? They've been sort of like, oh, here, sign this paper, look over there and sign this paper, and go on. And now you really have to, and what I've always done, and I think Virginia's always done, you have to be transparent. And I welcome that conversation with people.
Just
Absolutely.
one more question.
Yes, sir.
Do you think a 3-3 split is equitable considering the workload on each of the two parties? I tend to think that a selling broker's got a lot more work to do. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me.
That is a really good question, and it's how. Well, I'll let you.
Yeah,
and then
I
I'll
mean, I
pick
think
up.
it's a great question. I think if you're doing your job, as a buying agent, I think you're going to earn every bit of that. You know, because that is quite the investment that, you are a fiduciary for your buyer, and that person is putting their trust in you as an agent to make sure they're making a wise investment. You're making a wise investment, and so that you're going to buy with confidence. And there's so many ways, that a contract can go sideways, right? It's, most of us hold our breath through the inspection, right? And whoo, we got through that.
And even after.
And then after that, I mean, there are a lot of ways that, a good agent is going to usher you through the closing and be your agent for life, right? That's what a good agent's going to do. It's not going to be just a one and done or a transaction thing.
I really appreciate you commenting on that. Imagine a lot of people here too, to help them understand a little bit maybe.
Mary had a question.
Well, just to recap the
Use your
introduction-
mic.
Just to recap the introduction where you all were explaining both the buyer now and the seller have to sign this agreement with their agents before the buyer gets to see any homes, but also the buyer is entering into some agreement about the commission to the buyer's agent.
The buyer rep agreement that we did, that is signed because if I'm the buyer and Vince is going to be showing me properties, we have to come to agreement before. That's supposed to have been in place forever, but sometimes we would let it slide.
Well, okay, the words cooperative agreement, I always thought, we talk again about the closing statement, the old days where it was a 6%, and then on the statement I thought, but I can't remember now, it's too long ago, that commission would show up split between.
Right.
It would.
It did? At the old days, 6% goes on the closing statement that way?
It still will be that way.
It'll
It's the
split it up, whatever the
compensation,
agreement is. Yeah.
Okay, so then the buyer is still, though, not responsible for putting out any money toward their agent's commission. It's all on the seller to pay, both.
They're paid for it in the purchase of the house.
Yeah, they actually buy the house. But yeah, you're correct. So in the case of, if you decided as a seller not to offer cooperative compensation, and I want to kind of keep saying that.
Wait. Yeah, I was going to ask, does co-op compensation equivalent to 6% always?
Always negotiable, and cooperative compensation typically means a split in the total number that they're selling your house
I see.
for.
So the only the total figure is shown up when you sign that agreement, say 6% or 5.5%, only that total amount. Okay, I'm sorry, it's
No, that's a
confusing.
good
No, you're
question.
great.
On the buyer rep, you're looking just at the buyer's side, and the scenario we played out was your expectation would be 3%. Some of the confusion is when we use the term cooperative broker or agent, all that means is the other side, the
Right.
buyer's side. So that's an agreement, but as the listing agent, when we've said we will, no set, but if we're saying I'm going to, in essence, pay the broker 6%, and of that 6%, my broker is going to pay 3% to the other side.
So then does it still break out on the closing statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Or would it only show the total amount on the seller's side?
It'll break it out on the closing statement.
What it will say, because it is an expense to the buyer, to the seller, it is something that I am paying out as a seller. So on the seller's side, it will have compensation for realtors. And so you say, that's how they pay. It's included in the price of the home.
On the contract, when a contract is executed, there's a space at the bottom of one of the pages that say, I agree to pay X percentage to the buyer's agent. And the title company looks at that number and gives that percentage, and that's how they break it out in the closing statement.
Okay, so is this description and role-playing that you're talking about kind of unique to Texas, or is this nationwide now? The same type of restrictions and practices are supposed to go in nationwide?
Nationwide.
Or is each state kind of fiddling with this?
Nationwide. And that was sort of one of the problems is in some forums that I've been a part of, some agents said, oh, I've never had a buyer representation agreement signed. And then my jaw dropped because, our broker, Avis Wukash, was, head of the Texas Real Estate Commission, several years ago, for several years. And so she doesn't play around. We've always had to do that. So it shocked me when I know that other places and states didn't really require that. But that is nationwide. And one other quick thing, in terms of our role play, my buyer consultation is what I call it, this was a very watered down version, right? Because you have to really connect with somebody pretty quickly to then get them to sign a piece of paper that says, oh, you'll pay me this much money, right? But it's really about providing value, and it's about me showing you in my documentation and my personality that I'm the guy for you. I can help, you find a home, and here's the things I'll do to, do that. Absent, and this is law, absent a buyer representation agreement, I am a sub-agent of the seller. I work for the seller until such time as I have an agreement to represent you as your buyer representative.
Well, I was going to ask, I think the reverse of that. Suppose I'm the seller and I have Virginia as my selling agent, and she finds somebody who actually wants to buy my place, and she brings that person to the table. Then what happens with this?
A good question. Virginia, pass that over to you.
So if we have someone who wants to buy in your case, your condo, so they're going to bring an offer. And in that, they will have already checked to say, it's called, since we can't put an MLS, I have a buyer interested in your property. Are you offering compensation? And my recommendation to my clients is yes, and generally 3%. So that would answer that.
But I think she's saying if someone calls you to bring a buyer.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. So then that we don't have to have a buyer rep agreement then, because they're unrepresented in essence. And that is worked out. There's probably going to be an adjustment, but
I don't recommend that ever.
I don't have the control. It's somebody goes directly to Virginia.
Right. So there have been cases where, and you can correct me, Virginia has had to contact another realtor to say,
often
hey,
we will
offer to
refer it.
represent them. I personally, and this is my editorial for the day, I find it hard to believe that you would want to go into a purchase of a major investment without someone negotiating and representing you on your behalf. While the seller has their representation, you don't as a buyer. But it has happened on occasion, and there are forms that you would need to sign and the buyer would need to sign saying, I'm unrepresented and I know what I'm doing. I'm of sound mind, basically. And so their paperwork, but that's not recommended.
Okay, last question. I'm sorry. I'm trying to understand the weight of the seller agent versus the buyer's agents that bring buyers to you. And I kind of see a situation where the seller puts a lock on the door and goes away and waits for people to come. How does the seller actively market other than an MLS?
Good question, and that's going to vary with agents. Right now, getting a good description of your property and good pictures onto the MLS, and there it radiates out when someone says, oh, we put it out to 40 sites. We all do the same. It goes to MLS, to Realtor.com, and then it's out for the world to see. So that is our strongest marketing. But no, we don't want to just be sitting around and waiting. If we know, I contact agents who, I've got this house or I've got this condo, do you have some, especially if you have a network of people, and so that we know, what they might have a interested buyer. We have realtor tours that we put houses on.
Yeah, social media now is a big deal. And so most realtors have a social media strategy for Instagram, Facebook. You can paid ads on those platforms. I have a listing in Morningstar now that we've coordinated with 4, 5, 6 other homes that are listed in the area, and we have a community-wide open house this weekend. And so we drive traffic to that, and then we were having raffles and things like that. So you're actively marketing. A good agent will actively market their listing until you get a solid offer.
Thank you.
And that also varies on the neighborhood and kind of what is needed, what is appropriate. I'll just leave it there for give another one. But anyway, okay, Carlos.
And one last thing.
Oh.
If your house is not priced right, there's no amount of marketing that will help it sell. Just want to say that.
One, and I don't know, Vince, at least from my experience, one rule of thumb from the National Association of Realtors that I really found helpful, and I talked to my sellers about, I want to price the house at what we feel the market is paying. If we put and I want it in good condition. If we put it on the market and we don't have 7 showings in 21 days in 3 weeks, the market's telling us we're overpriced. If we have a lot of activity, if we have 10 showings and no offer, wow, that looked great, but it's not worth it. So it's market is telling us we're overpriced, and we need to make a price adjustment. So there's a lot of information we can bring in. Carlos.
A question: if you simply want to look at homes, but you're not really committed to it, do you have to sign an agreement for every home you're going to see, although you're not really, committed to buying a home?
Good question.
The buy rep agreement covers a time frame, so you could
It takes
agree
you in. It's not per home,
any home, within
but
a certain time
like
frame.
6
sir.
months or whatever period of time. But it makes a connection with, and part of that is good for the buyer's agent too. If people call, oh, will you show me this home? And then tomorrow they call Vince and say, oh, would you go show me this home? And it just go down the line. We're investing time and energy, especially if we're bringing resources and helping people. So it's building that relationship that,
It is.
it's as a realtor when people, oh, I'm just looking on my own. Well, you need professional information, advice, and so on. So I encourage people to make a relationship.
Yeah, I tell people a good buyer's rep agent is more than Vanna White, kind of opening a door and saying, flipping on lights. But yes, ma'am.
Should I see another? Oh, okay.
Okay, is this new buyer's agreement that we have signed, is it exclusive? Is that part of what you're putting in that agreement? That if I'm going to look at houses, because I've been through this in different areas, and in some places, they wanted me to sign an agreement that said that if I bought a house, that agent got compensation whether they were the agent that showed me the house or not.
First of all, it's not a new buyer representation agreement. It's always been in existence, and it's the same buyer's rep agreement that we've used. I mean, it may had some minor tweaks to it, but it is just for the record. It's
At least
always
here
been in
in Texas,
existence.
well,
Yes.
especially for us.
But it's about procuring calls. Did I procure calls in showing you? I would not say that the way that agent said that. I would never say something like that. Like, regardless of if I show you or not, that you have to earn your money, right? As a buyer's agent, I need to show the home to you, walk through the home. I need to set you with a listing portal. I need to provide, comps on the home that you want to put an offer on. So, you would in that case, let's say you did sign something and it sounds a little wonky, I would just call that agent back and say, I want to get out of this agreement, put it in writing and have them terminate the buyer rep agreement. Yeah.
Again, it's investing time and energy in getting to know a buyer rather than just going willy-nilly everywhere, but hopefully people form their relationship. I mean, the same thing with a listing agent. It's about relationships. If you don't feel comfortable working with the person, probably not a good relationship to enter into. For most of us, and I'm going back to the listing side now, when we meet with an initial visit, or often we call it a consultation, where we look at the house, we share about the services we can provide, market update, and so on. There's sometimes when we share our expectations and the seller shares their expectations, and we may decide we're not a good match. If they have kind of different, well, this is the way I want it done, and I'm only going to, we may say, I don't think I'm the realtor for you. I'm sure there will other realtors who could better meet your needs. So, I want to work with people that we have a common goal and appreciate one another and so on. Okay, let's see, one more question, maybe. Any more? Or maybe not. Any closing words from you, Vince?
Thank you.
I appreciate your being here. I really like the bumper. That's my takeaway from today. It's a really good description. I want to thank Vince for taking time to be with us today. We're both kind of making ourselves vulnerable in how to explain this. You, I think, have a head start with understanding, because a lot of people don't have the information that you have at least been exposed to today. Mid-August is when things really start. And you're right, it's nationwide. It's not just Texas. Everybody is struggling with this right now, trying to make sense of it. But we want you to have the information. Most important thing to be aware of, it's about transparency. Ask those questions, understand, and it does get, well, why am I paying the buyer's agent? Well, because they're selling your house, and so the buyer is paying. They just paid a large sum of money, so we can always look at it with our narrow perspective. But.
And yeah, so I agree that there's lots of terms we've thrown around today, and so I'll be over here at one of the tables. I'm more than happy to we can talk until you feel confident in what's going on and get all your questions answered. So.
Okay, one last question or comment. Mary? Wait, we can't hear you. Speak louder. Selling, that's
I do not think it will. That was an idea that got floated by, well, if sellers, it's more transparent, and sellers just, you don't have to pay the buyer's agent. You've never had to pay them, but then the idea was that home prices would go down. I don't agree with that. I think it's yet to be determined, but I think a seller is going to be, I sell my house for $500,000, and now I'm going to sell it for, $485,000 because I didn't have to. I don't think so, because this whole thing has been baked into price for years, and I don't think we'll see a significant change.
It's probably going to just roll along. I want to thank you for being here. Your yellow feedback forms. Would you bring that little basket out that we have on the registration table? We'll put it out on this table. You can leave your feedback forms if you want to be registered for next month's seminar. It's going to be letting go. Yeah, that's an interesting topic as we look at downsizing. But thanks for being here. Thanks to Vince. Thanks to our partners. And stay healthy and well, and hope to see you in August. Thanks.